so simple in its style. Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes. I'm joined by Quinny. It's Monday. We are the 4 in a row champs. Quinny, how did you enjoy your weekend, first and foremost?
Yeah, it was a cracking weekend. It was very much in the air, wasn't it? Title wins and upsetting the history books and all the rest of it. Watched a wee bit of Liverpool doing the same on Sunday as well. So, again, if anyone caught that, it was a big weekend of huddles on You Never Walk Alones and, legendary managerial efforts and all the rest of it. So, yeah, very good weekend. Started off with a banger, obviously, Saturday afternoon, and weather was good, and yeah, everything was great. What about yourself?
Absolutely, yes. And we're going to be talking about the performance, which was outstanding. There's absolutely no getting away from the fact that when we're at the business end of a campaign, we come alive. That's the words, of course, of Brendan Rodgers himself. We're going to be looking at some of the images, some of the best images that were taken over the weekend as well, Quinny. And just to let everybody know that obviously the title party, the street party, when it happens, Acsom are going to be in there digging about, getting some reaction on that particular day as well. So we've scored 5 goals, 3 consecutive games, 1 in a cup, 2 in the league, Quinny, and we've just clicked back into place, haven't we?
Yeah, big time. And like getting up to the high gears, getting into the high revs at the business end of the year is what everyone's kind of known as the cliche of the champion team or the hallmark of champions, and it's very much been felt over the last couple of games. I think a big part of it though has been the squad strength that we've had over the season. Like Rodgers referenced it in some of his post-match comments about like rotating the squad through the winter fixtures and juggling with all the competitions so that now when you get to the sharp end of the year you're still firing on everything. And as much as like there's some positions we could spend a full show talking and arguing about who is the best guy for centre midfielder up front and all the rest of it, when you are changing guys that often, even though they are quite similar, there is just going to be like an 11 that have just got that synergy, have got that kind of chemistry going. And it's felt in the last couple of games, Scales and Taylor have been maybe a wee bit of the catalyst into that. We've seen Hitat actually like show a lot more in the last couple of games. Not that he shows less before that, but like I think Hitat is a player that divides the fans. And the last couple of games, everyone's been quite in unison that he's been a maverick. I think he was getting called over here, wasn't he? So
A maverick, aye. And the thing with that, Quinny, is in the modern day, some people might call them cult icons, cult players. In the modern day, there's not much space for a maverick to operate because it's all about the consistency of every single performance. And that includes even for offensive players to be able to do the defensive work, to be the hod carriers when necessary. And if you don't do it in a team like a Brendan Rodgers team, then I sometimes look at the player and think, will they survive? And that's been the kind of nature of the discussions over the last wee while. But then he comes out and he reminds you all the good bits about Rio Hatate, why he's worth his weight in gold at times, a game changer. You look at that goal that he scored against Kilmarnock, it was in the sun, and he runs away and he's just thinking that technique, that level, that quality is something that not every player possesses, and that's why he's still in and around the building 3.5 years down the line. If we start off with Rio, he tried his best to get Jota in amongst the celebrations by giving him a backie. Probably not a good idea when you've had quite a nasty knee injury. But in terms of his performances over the last few weeks, Quinny, if there was a mindset about players coming to the end of their cycle and all that at Celtic, do you think he's changed that?
It's a hard one. It's a hard one to call in that regard because Hitate has been one of these guys that's been quite deep, hasn't he? He's had his own little blogs and his own little diary entry kind of things, excerpts we've seen over the years back when he's in Japan in the off seasons and stuff like that. So it's hard to know where he's at. I've always felt with the Japanese players, Hitate in particular, that there's this kind of soft kind of competition between him and some of his contemporaries. Like we signed him from Kawasaki, and there's been like 3 or 4 other guys from Kawasaki, that same team he was in, end up, around Europe and in the Premier League and all the rest of it. So I've always felt there's this little kind of thing in between all of them for like, who's climbing the highest on the ladder, as it were. And Hitate, like, I think the big thing he gets at Celtic is winning titles, Champions League exposure. And now that he's been in the national team a bit more consistently this year, like, again, the great thing you normally get, and it's horrible to stereotype people even in a positive way, but just to kind of lean into what we know in some cases, but like, it's not that these guys are super like greedy. It's not like, oh, I need to move to Fulham to go and get paid 200 grand a week or anything like that. It is about, their career, their kind of path in life, their legacy, as it were, that they're making. And Hitate will see all this stuff that's going on now, and especially with Kyogo being so recent in the memory, like the grass isn't always greener. We even seen it with Nakamura. When Nakamura left here, he played for Espanyol, was there for like half a season or something, and then vanished. And it's one of those ones that isn't. Celtic isn't normal. Being like this, having fans that are like this, having all the expectations, and then going on to actually capture this stuff isn't normal. Isn't just guaranteed elsewhere. So it's hard to know where he's actually is going to have that ambition of wanting to get to the Prem and push into the national team a bit more and everything else. But I don't think he's in a situation where like other players are in that kind of situation, like where they're in kind of no man's land. They're not a decent team, but they don't really win anything. They're not really in the Champions League or maybe Europa League, or he's actually got something here that's building his career, building his legacy, as it were.
Yeah, I think so. And some of the recent departures obviously have all showed that the grass isn't always greener. Every individual will have their own ambitions, I guess, Quinny. And he's maybe looking at the situation of Celtic were his route into European football. He might then look down south and think, right, but if I do play for, let's say, a Brentford or Brighton, where am I going to be in the food chain? I'll be playing in a big league. But Kyogo left to play in a bigger league. And look what happened to his career as well. I do think that there's a pedestal that you can be put on as a Celtic player, as a Celtic hero and an icon, and be treated in a certain way that when you leave Celtic, Quinny, you maybe realise just how big a club you've left, and you might have a much fatter, bigger bank balance, etc. But I mean, I think the cautionary tale in that respect would be Jota. Leaving. Not for football ambition, but for financial ambition, financial gain. And maybe there's a plan there that it goes over to Saudi Arabia for 2 or 3 years, makes it, and then he can make any choice he wants after that. But what I see there with Jota as a player who was in the, he was in the reckoning for the Portuguese national team. He was named in some of the kind of long lists for squads. He wins a treble at Celtic. He seems to be at the peak of his powers. And then his career falls off a cliff. And he comes back to Celtic, and we've kind of been building him back up. And then, of course, what happens at the weekend is he gets this jarring of the knee. There's rumours flying about this morning that he's going to be out for the rest of the season. That was the only down point, wasn't it, of the entire weekend?
Yeah, I think so. And just the last thing I'll kind of say on the Hitate kind of vibe here as well is like when people are like getting on his back, maybe are saying like, oh, he looks stroppy, he looks like he's in a huff. I just think the guy like super cares. Like if he comes off the pitch and he's not really materially influenced the match, or I think he's really like raging at himself, like not in the personal side of things, but the team and everything else that goes around that. I think it's one of the things I was really happy that we did sign Bernardo, because like one thing you always see from Bernardo, and I would say the same about Hitate, is they like playing for Celtic. They like putting on the shirt. They love the kind of everything that goes with the package, as it were, and I think that's he's maybe been a little bit misunderstood at times with some of that previously, but with Jota, yeah, it was a funny one, because when you looked at it, you're like, oh, he's dived or something there, he's trying to buy a free kick. But when you actually see the replay, it's like I said on my analysis, it looks like a kind of twisted ankle. Obviously, it's his knee, but that's kind of motion of just like a sprain or a quick kind of twist, So, I was a bit more hopeful it'd only been like a fortnight or so, but if it's reported to be a bit longer, it's not a surprise, because it could have been those things can either be, they could be anywhere on the scale, can't they?
Yeah, I do think that when Jota came in, we were impressed with how quickly he became effective and started contributing, Quinny. And then the chat on Acsom was that people were a wee bit surprised when he dropped out with the starting 11. He gets back in, and then that happens. So if that's curtains for the rest of his campaign, you wrap him up, you get him as strong as possible, and we go again for next season with him. 4 in a row. There's been a lot of chat, Quinny, a lot of chat. I mean, dearie me, on the socials, and a lot of negativity from the rest of Scottish football in relation to the success that Celtic have earned. And I can only go from my own output and feedback that I've had, but probably if I had a list of the 3 most raging sets of football fans, it would be in the order would currently be Rangers, followed by, I would say, Aberdeen, and then Hibs. I think Hearts have got other things to concern themselves with. So we're going to be digging into that wee bit. I want to share some photos in relation to the weekend and the types of memories that are being created. The first one, I asked the Acsom group, give us some photos and let us know some of the kind of pivotal images that, for me, crystallised the weekend. And one of the first ones is this one of Brendan, and it speaks volumes because he's kicking one of the balls back into the crowd that had obviously been thrown on in protest. So it tells a real story. That we've also found out that Brendan's a left footer, which I wasn't aware of. I don't know how good he was as a player, but another guy who had a bad knee injury, I think it was. Now, Brendan Rodgers obviously letting the players take all the adulation after the game, Quinny, but then after he's done all his punditry duties, he goes over there and he gives them the big, the fist up and all the rest of it. And then the ball gets booted back in. So there's two things to talk about. Obviously, Rodgers and where we're going under him, but also the fact that there was a protest, and that protest was around fans getting fleeced again on the ticket prices.
Yeah, it was it was funny to watch on TV, seeing all the tangerines coming on in the first half, and then it was quite surprising to see there was a second half like display or thing is protest as well. All in good kind of spirit as well, which I think is what most people are after with these demonstrations, is it isn't like crossing the line in any way. But it's obviously a point that's hit the Celtic fans hard in their pocket on this one. And I thought Ryan118 subbed it up quite perfectly. I don't know if you've seen his rant on Twitter, but he was saying, like, how everyone kind of moans back, like, oh, at Parkhead, it's 32 quid to sit behind the pole. Well, he was talking about it. It's such a great point. I'm so surprised nobody's ever made it before, but like, Dundee United, Hibs, Aberdeen, they only bring like 12 fans. You know what I mean? So if one of them wants to sit behind the pole to take a picture of it, and, there's nothing else you can do about that. There's plenty of seats in the away ends for them to move to,
Proper attention seeking. I did see that clip, and he was right. It's proper attention seeking, and again, it's one of these things in relation to the away support. This has been over a period of years and years with regards to, we know exactly what to expect in terms of numbers, how many people are going to be coming to the ground, and with regards to that, if the numbers were larger, then it could expand over time. Everybody looks at the root cause, Quinny, and the root cause that they can see, the only root cause they can see of all Scottish football's issues at the moment is Celtic. That's the only issue that they seem to have. Now, I was having a wee look at this before we share some of the other images and also talk about Brendan Rodgers and the job he is doing at Celtic. But the big thing has been Celtic are buying titles, and that's actually came from fans of clubs like West Brom. Don't know what you're interested in when it comes to Scottish football. Arsenal, I've had Arsenal fans over the weekend on the socials, Quinny. You just buy it, you buy it. So I thought to myself, right, during the 4 in a row era, how much money has Celtic thrown in terms of buying these titles? So I had a look at Celtic, I had a look at Rangers, Aberdeen, Hibs and Hearts. So in terms of the money we've spent, net, we've not spent any. Celtic has not spent a penny if you look at the net on transfers. We've been very, very good in that respect. And in actual fact, we've made a profit of over £16 million in the 4 seasons in which we have won the league, Quinny. Now, what that comes down to for me, comes down to the recruitment, of course, but also the appointment of the managerial candidates that are available at that time as well. So we've had Ange Postecoglou, we've had Brendan Rodgers. So we've appointed the right manager. We've brought in the right players and we've done the right transfer business. So we've made 16 million quid. We've not spent any money in terms of bringing players in. On the bottom line, we haven't spent any money. And in actual fact, as we all know, our last set of financials showed that we made a profit of 43.9 million, right, in the previous year, right? So what that all gears towards is a football club that's incredibly well run, right? It's not just about having more money than everybody else and just buying more players than everybody. This ground zero was 1994. This has been built up over a period of 31 years. And during that 31 years, there's been moments where Celtic had to change the way that they did things. So after Seville, we had to bring in someone like Peter Lawwell, Quinny. We had to do it because we were absolutely overspending. The books don't lie, right? And then when it came up to, absolutely, what was happening globally affected what happened when we lost the league. Exactly. But we also didn't do things well enough during that period in terms of recruitment, and we had to change that. And we did change it. We changed it when Ange Postecoglou came in. I mean, when did we ever go out and buy 6 players from the Japanese region of football transfers? We didn't do it. So we completely changed the model in order to improve. So in the last 4 seasons, that's the profit we've made off transfers. But I thought to myself, right, let's try and be fair about this. Let's look at the other clubs. So next in line, Aberdeen, whose fans have been all over the socials, going on about Celtic buying trophies up, must be boring and tedious, and get the synonym, get the thesaurus out so that we can see any more words that are not tedious and boring, as it were. Aberdeen have also made a profit in transfers over the same period, over the 4 years, and they've made just under £9.5 million. So they've done pretty well when it comes down to the ins and outs of transfer business. And when you look at some of the big sales, we're looking at Lewis Ferguson, Calvin Ramsey, who you mentioned at the weekend, and also Miovski, of course. So they've done really good business there. Absolutely brilliant. You pick up a player like Ferguson from Hamilton Accies, you develop him, you sell him on at a profit. We're doing it maybe on a bigger scale. Right. So then you look at their last set of financials. They made a loss of 880k. So that would suggest to me the club who has made the second biggest amount from the transfer windows in those 4 seasons in Scottish football has actually mismanaged the football club, therefore lost money, 880 grand. They called it that, it was a modest loss. It's still almost £1 million in that particular year when you have sold Miovski for, I think, a record sale for Aberdeen Football Club. The next one in line, unsurprisingly, is Rangers. And Rangers have made a profit in the 4 years. Quinny, I think what this shows is Scottish football knows how to flip a player. Right? We know that sometimes you bring a player through from the academy and you can make a few quid off them. And Rangers have done it. £7.25 million profit in the 4 years.
Yeah, they kind of get out of jail a lot with the Calvin Ramsey bun. But
Calvin Ramsey and Nathan Patterson.
Calvin Bassey.
Bassey. Who's Calvin Ramsey?
The Aberdeen kid.
Oh, that's right, yeah. So he was in the other one. No, Calvin Bassey and Nathan Patterson.
Bassey got them out of jail big time. If you take him out of the equation, it's a totally different picture there. But I think you're all right. I think Scottish football it's definitely shown it can turn a player or two around. I think it's kind of the field of players that most clubs are shopping in. I remember, and we're going back a wee bit, but the best players from Aberdeen and Dundee United in that over the last couple of years end up moving to League One. And a big part of this game nowadays is putting your players into a better league or into a better club, like moving Miovski to Girona, moving Ferguson to Bologna. That's the sort of business that should happen. But yeah, sorry, I've interrupted the
not
run.
At all. Not
but
at all.
Bassey's a big outlier for them that really saves their books.
We're talking 20 million, I think.
Bassey? Oh no, I was over 30. I thought it was like
you're right though. It completely flips that. It flips that on its head, 100%. The other clubs that have been giving us plenty digs. Hibs, one of the most shambolically ran football clubs in Scotland, actually, when you look at the potential of a capital club to do something, and they consistently Hibs it. So in the last 4 years, they've had some big sales as well. Boyle, for example, Doig, Nisbet, Melkerson. Nisbet was a really good kind of player that you bring in and you flip for a profit pretty quickly. They've done really well with that. Okay, so Hibs just under £7 million profit in the 4 years when we're talking about players. However, last year they reported £7.2 million losses in a year. Shockingly wrong football club. Don't moan about a club that's run well, Quinny. Get your own backyard in order. And then Hearts, I was actually quite surprised at Hearts because they haven't done much in terms of spend. And they have made a profit of just under £1 million over the 4 years. Their one big sale was Cochrane, a player I actually quite liked. I thought he was good. And they made a decent profit off of him. But again, last year, like the rest of the clubs, £1.2 million loss. So the clubs aren't being run properly, right? But they'll look for someone else to blame, Quinny, rather than look inwardly and say, what are we doing wrong here? What are we doing wrong? Now, I'll tell you what Hearts are doing wrong. Hearts are holding on to a player like Lawrence Shankland when he's at the absolute peak of his powers, having paid something like 400 grand to Beershot for him. Flip him. And it completely changes the whole outlook of your football club for the next couple of seasons, right? But they didn't do it. What's he worth now? And I think also, if you were to look at Rangers, there's loads of examples of that, but the two big ones that jumped out at me was Kent and Morelos. Now, you were never going to get £30 million from that fictitious Chinese club, right? But you could have got a transfer fee. You didn't get anything for them. So the other clubs need to be smarter rather than just be bitter about this, Quinny.
Yeah, I think it was one of my early kind of Acsom shows I came on. I've always kind of referred to this as like the Ronny Penants or the Dyla Penants, because like, it's very easily forgotten today. Like, even just, I know you're going all the way back to the 90s with the, you know, the real recalibration of the club. But if you go back to that era, we were screaming out for money to be spent, and it just never ever was. And obviously they weren't in the leagues, and it was just chud along, get it done, get it done. And it was really frustrating being a Celtic fan going through all that. It's a wee bit harder, I think, for some of those teams to have that penance of like building the bank balance up or whatever. I said at the weekend, I think too many of them just get caught deer in the headlights and they get stuck with what to do, you know, because so many of them should have and have had, like you say, that really good crop of young players coming through. Like, you know, we mentioned Calvin Ramsey there, Nesbitt, even there's still some of those guys knocking around. Even Motherwell sold a guy in Austria last year, Max Johnson, as well. So, it feels like they're kind of all caught in between a rock and a hard place of bringing through youth and focusing on that, because Scottish teams, it's basically their best resource, or trying to moneyball a little bit and getting in free agents from lower league England and the unknown reaches of Scandinavia and whatever else. But when you are, with so many of them, just in my opinion, as an outsider, when you're trying to straddle that line, you're trying to do both things at once with limited resources. The constant change in a manager is like such a hindrance, and it just hemorrhages, you know, like, for lack of a better expression, I suppose, progression in the team, you know. And you know, like, I was really surprised that Hearts even appointed that Neil Crightley in the first place. Like, looking at his CV before Hearts, it's like, I remember when Hearts used to appoint guys like Shaba Laszlo and mad crazy guys you'd never heard of that would come in and like want to win a cup and put it on their CV and really have, not saying that guy didn't, you know, but they would have something going for them at least, you know. And you know, and I know it's probably going to split the chat here, right? But as far as like Scottish football goes, like, I think Derek McInnes has probably been one of the best in the league for recruitment. You know, he obviously had a bit of a time at Aberdeen, and Kilmarnock's a bit of a different story. But yeah, so I think like that it's well within their grasp to just get something in order a little bit more. You know, really buy in with a manager for like 5 years, even if, you know, you do, like, I'm thinking about Dundee United qualifying for the Europa League and then sacking the manager after getting humped off of Alkmaar. And fair enough, the league results were minging as well. And you know, there's, what was the, like, Naismith at Hearts, and I know like Naismith again, like, I'm not getting any love lost for him, but you know, you're building a project with him, they get into Europe and then they can him, you know. And you know, Hibs, you could say the same thing about. Whereas with Celtic, you know, when you take the size of turnover, the volume of shirt sales, the volume of ticket sales, everything that we organically have as a club that clubs in England don't have, never mind in Scotland, and you level the playing field in that regard of what does everyone have within their control, they've got way more ability to be way more sound as a footballing operation. And I think that's the kind of vibe that we get from the Ayr Uniteds and the Queen's Parks and the Falkirks, this kind of underbelly of clubs that are trying to, you know, go toe to toe with these bigger stadium, bigger kind of historic clubs. And those clubs, the ones you've mentioned that want to moan, and I guess we're kind of putting into this chat, like, it is like wasted resources. It's money and time ill spent. And then when you get to this point, like when Rangers were missing out the league for those years, like Aberdeen and Hearts and Hibs should have been in full gear to make themselves like, you know, make themselves as hard to pass for them in their return as possible. And then the knock-on effect for that is different. But they were all quite happy to, you know, like, oh, maybe Celtic will win a treble this year, maybe we'll win a cup, and we'll just carry on as we would anyway, you know. And it's now, whereas at that point we're squirreling away the cash. We're bringing in Christopher Ayer and loaning him in to Kilmarnock, and we are, you know, signing Stefan Johansson to be our main midfielder, and bringing through Callum McGregor and keeping James Forrest at the club, and you know, playing the game the way we did when that signing Nader Chifchi from Dundee United. You know, we were really being like tight for a few years there. And yeah, there will be moments where like Pookie comes in and maybe they're trying to go continental again, but that 3 or 4 years for that post-Lennon, pre-Rodgers segment was like, yeah, very conservative with a small c, to bring Tino's phrase into it.
I absolutely. I would say we coasted it. We absolutely coasted it. Yeah. And for me, when you look back at some of the signings, you're thinking to yourself, but interesting enough, that point that you made, I've got to give a shout out to the source of this. It was on X, inside the SPFL is the name of the tag. And it talks about in the 4 years before Rangers became a top-tier club, Celtic only won 50% of the available major domestic competitions. Since Rangers became a top-flight club, Celtic have won 80.77% of available cup competitions. In front of fans, that increases to 91.3%. Okay, so we're talking about a strong challenge, for example, but their stats simply do not lie. What I would say, you've mentioned Ronny Deila, and obviously 4 in a row was Ronnie's first season, right? 4 in a row, as it was kind of billed at the time, and we're at 4 in a row now. And I think it's almost like if you look at that list of 9 in a row, for example, Quinny, which we spoke about on Friday night, which I loved. That was tremendous. Anyone who's not seen it yet, go and have a look at the This Is Acsom from Friday. Acsom is looking at me though, as if to say, Cowdenbeath. We've got Tino. Tino, Acsom, and Quinny on This Is Acsom. What a lineup! What a lineup! And we'll be sharing clips from that throughout the week as well. So go and have a look at it. And it's pretty timeless. It's not like we're talking about the starting 11 at the weekend. We're talking about where we are, where we're going, what could potentially stop us from getting there. But if you 9 in a row, stroke 10 in a row comes up, wait to the very end to hear Tino's take on it. And the 9 in a row, in terms of the managers that won it, the first 3 was Neil Lennon. We then had 2 under Ronny Deila. We then had 2 under Rodgers because he never stayed to the end, the third season. And then we had 2 under Neil Lennon. So when you look at that, where are we in terms of this 9 in a row scale? Which, let's be honest, Quinn, it's a thing. It's a thing in Scottish football. And it's a thing for Celtic supporters. I mean, some of the guys that stopped the 10 or won the 1, depending on how you like to look at that, go on about, the pressure of the fact that they were protecting what the team in the 60s and the 70s had done, the legacy of the Lions, if you like. They were trying to protect that 9 in a row. They didn't want anyone to beat it. And a lot of the players talk about a season that they didn't particularly enjoy, Quinny, as a result of the level of pressure that was on them. So if we're looking at that as an aside, we're at kind of like stage 4 of that. Last time we did it, we were at that Ronny Deila stage that you just spoke about. This time round, we're at a Brendan Rodgers stage where we're spending £11 million on a single player. We're pushing to progress in the Champions League. And it looks as though year on year there will be progression. I would say that we're well ahead of the curve if you compare the 2 runs.
Oh, big time. Yeah, because again, like I mentioned it at some point, maybe it was on the Friday show you mentioned there, but like that penance that we served through that period there, because Lennon got to spend money on players, Rodgers spent money on players, that Deila era was just kind of vacant of that kind of thing. Is that the only solace you could take at that point was that it's a big picture play. It's in the future. We'll be well armed up and we'll be able to take advantage of it. And that is the level it feels that we're at the moment. So by contrast and comparison, yeah, it should be like, and again, we've got 4, let's celebrate it and enjoy it this year, the treble and all the rest of it, of course. But if you are gauging it on that kind of run, like the gap between us and them now versus when Ronnie was here, and fair enough, there was divisions between us at that point, but now it's maybe arguably just as big, if not bigger, in a lot of ways because of the mismanagement of resources. They're over there praying for a guardian angel to come and save them. Yeah, aye. And the reformat of the Champions League and all the money that's going to come along with that, as long as so we do the job and get qualified, of course, is all the transfer business. It's that's the gap really now in Scottish football. Is it's taken us maybe about 10 years, but we have joined the rest of Europe in the 21st century or the 21st and a half century football wise, depending on how you want to think of it. Whereas the rest of Scottish football is still kind of in that early millennium vibe of £1 million is a lot of money for a football player.
Or £11 million is a lot of money for a player.
11 million is a lottery one, 11 million.
I know. It's incredible, Quinny, because I think we do need to get over that. We need to get over the fact that we paid £11 million for a single player. And I reckon that we need to go over it because, if we do want to progress, I reckon we need to do it again this summer and more. And we could break our transfer record again and just normalise it. Not because we want to chuck money about. I've already given you the figures. We know what we're doing when it comes to the buying and selling of players and making a profit. And then what you want to do is you don't want to squander it, as I think we did 2 seasons ago in the summer that Brendan came in. That money was squandered. When you accumulate Mark Tillio and Gustav Lagerbielke and Mike Navrotic, put it all together, a waste of money, complete waste of funds. And I would have much rather that £11 million was invested in a Belgian youngster who had played in one of the top 5 leagues in Europe, in the Bundesliga, and who comes to Celtic and he doesn't look like a duck out of water. See what I did there? See that seamless transition to the next subject, and the next picture over the weekend is a duck. A duck outside Celtic Park. If you're the wee guy laughing on the right-hand side and you're watching right now, then get involved in the comment section, because I said to Quinny just before we came on, what's the story with the duck? And we're not that sure. So I had a wee look here, right? And apparently he is a pet of a Celtic fan. He was wearing a custom-made Celtic scarf, and we even know his name. His name is Frosty the Duck. Now, I don't know why you would bring a duck to the football. I don't know if there's a story I'm unaware of here. But if there is, then give me a shout. Do people know the fella who owns this duck? It's a strange one. But one of the images, obviously, that we'll always go back to. I remember back in the 90s, there we go, there's the klaxon. There was a fox running about the park now and again. It was a strange thing. The game would stop and a fox was running about the pitch, and then it would disappear. And you're thinking, why? Why are they doing that? What kind of protest is this? Allowing a fox to run onto the park? Bizarre. But anyway, there you go, Frosty the Duck. If you're your owner are watching, you want to appear on This Is Acsom, that'll be an interesting episode. What did you think when you seen the celebrations up at Celtic Park and the flares and the singing, and obviously the manager and the players coming out, Quinny? You just don't tire of it, do you? You never will tire of it.
No, far from it. It's always good to see I had to catch the post-match celebrations afterwards. So I jumped on here with you guys just to join in the celebrations. But no, you definitely don't tire of it, because the big thing of being a Celtic fan is the winning part, So it's part of the menu. So this is like the just desserts, to finish that analogy, I suppose, of the season. Like you mentioned earlier, at the street party end of the season, I've been at the last couple in there with the camera for Celtic here. It's been good fun, and I look forward to it every time it's on the horizon. Every time we look to be doing another big season or another treble or something, it's going to be going off. And that's there's nothing boring about it at all. This is, again, it's maybe one of those things where people say even if I had all the money in the world, I wouldn't drive a Ferrari. And then you give them the keys to one, and it's a different story all of a sudden, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. And again, we are referencing quite a lot of the stuff that we've been reading, and stuff that's been aimed at Celtic and us in relation to other football clubs. And I'm just always of the view, Quinny, if you're not good enough, look inward, improve, even look at who's the best in the game and say, how can I emulate that? How can I get better? Rather than just saying, oh, it's not fair. The way this game's built isn't fair. And I think there's a lot more to it than that. Brendan Rodgers, again, after the game, he's standing there with wee Jackie, Ailey Barber, James McFadden and Chris Sutton, and he says he's going to be here 200%. So does that mean he's going to stay another season after that then? So he's definitely going to be here next season, Quinny. But again, he went into this and he was going into the fact that people who are reporting on my future and saying how I feel about this job don't know me, don't understand me. Basically what he was saying is all that narrative is a nonsense. And I do think at some point over the piece, over the summer, an announcement might be made in terms of his future. Do you get that vibe yourself?
I very much hope so, yeah. I hate to harp backwards, but I was saying to you at some point, I forget where it was, but for me, Rodgers now sees himself as a Champions League manager rather than a Premier League manager. So I think that was part of the thing that he had on his back when he came up here the last time, was maybe get a wee bit of unfinished business. But the way everything's kind of moved on and evolved, if you're Brendan Rodgers, right, or any football manager, and I'll be looking at Ange and maybe think about something similar, what do you want in your job? You want to be comfortable, you want to be in charge, you want to feel like you're achieving something, you want to feel and Rodgers' stuff he's been saying over the last week or two, if you really listen to it, he's really got his heart on his sleeve about how he loves being at the club, and it's a passion thing as much as a professional thing. And the number one worry, obviously, we've had when he left last time and on the return is the back and the support, the club being in the same kind of vision. Because I think the number one hope we've always had with Rodgers is that he's one of us, and he's really got that we can be bigger than what we are approach and mentality to it. Whereas for those Ronny years, it was very much, it felt like that was being stifled ever so slightly. So if he feels that he's got the backing to fulfill the potential we've got sitting here on the table at the moment, I don't see him being in any rush to move on, really. Like, what's he going to move to? He's going to move to another team where you lose 4 games in a row and they think about sacking you and all the rest of it, and then you're back in doing nothing. Whereas, like, you can tell from so many of the things he said that, you know, the way you've referenced it on the channel before here is like being rewriting out of history or whatever. You can really feel that that's an important factor to him. Is, again, same thing I've seen with Hitat, like legacy, their history, their career as a body of work, as it were. And I really think that should the conditions be correct, there is no reason for him to leave until, I'm not going to finish the sentence, is completed. You know, like, so I'm not going to go far down the road here, right? But you know, like, if he stayed for that long, that's like, nobody's holding any grudges or bringing up the past ever again, are they? You know, some of the Duck names that are coming in the chat, by the way, are incredible.
They are class. No, we're going to have to bring this in. Here we go. The first thing I would say is Opinionated Glaswegian, the OG, says, it really is a guide, Duck, I'm sure. I read it's to accompany someone with mental health. So someone is giving someone support, and maybe in crowds they wouldn't feel comfortable, and the Duck helps them through. Colin Bean says, Darius Duckcheck.
I like that.
That's not bad at all. We've also got Quacky McNamara coming in, Alpha 0964, and any others that you might see in the comments, give us a shout because they are quality. What other ones have you seen?
Paddy Lavery's one.
I've not seen it yet. What is
it? Diego Quacksalk.
Imagine bringing up him. In fact, he'd have been better with a Duck at left back. So, Patrick, thank you very much for supporting the channel. Patrick Doherty, Dear Snake Mountain, did you slither in the title race? There you go. That could be the name of one of Liam's blogs over the next couple of weeks. But at least we did get the venue right, Patrick. Well done, Master of the Universe CSC. I like that. And Doogie Lynch, you're also in on the YouTube. I think the Duck has done the Celtic Park tour. That's interesting because David McLaughlin, who is one of the Celtic Park guides, did say something around, I see my old pals. It was good to see my old pal up at the celebrations. So you're maybe right, Doogie. You're maybe right. A big shout out to the Duck and his owner. Absolutely. Tony Ratton. Adam Ida, 2 goals on Saturday were class. Yeah, absolutely agree with that. And we're going to be talking about him in a moment. But the third image, and this is one that I threw into the pot that I really, really loved at the weekend, Quinny, is Tony Ralston. Look at that. He's in the background. Wouldn't surprise me if he just ate glass bottles for lunch, but it looks as though he's trying to decap it using his teeth. But it's a bit risky. It's a bit risky. A few of us over the years, I'm sure, have done the same when there's no a bottle opener to hands. But Nicholas Quinny, although he's not looking at Ralston, is giving an expression as if he is. What are you up to, Tony? That's one of my favourite images over the weekend. And I think what it does, though, it just lends itself to how much a squad game it's been this season as well, Quinny. You know, guys like Ralston and others who need to step in when required. And there might also be opportunities like that when somebody like Jota gets injured as well between now and the end of the season.
Yeah, it's a great image. I've seen as well, like, I think someone videoed, I can't remember what player it was, maybe like Taylor or Hitat or something like that, but someone was videoing the celebrations in the changing room. And it must be right after this picture because you see Ralston like taking his first drink of beer out of a beer bottle, and I can't remember he has like you know, like, oh, that was good, you know, like as if he's been waiting for it all season, which he maybe hasn't, but who knows. So yeah, that image right before it is it's a screw off, someone saying as well, but yeah,
it's a screw off. Well, why would you use your teeth? Why would you use your teeth if it was a screw off?
He's eating the glass. He's eating the
glass.
Probably is.
It probably is. I mean, he's hard as nails, isn't he? Tony Ralston. So Jota will be out certainly for our next game, which you and I were having a wee chat earlier about what's going to happen with regard to honour and who's going to be involved in that. And I'm looking forward to it, obviously. But we go to Ibrox, don't we? And Jota is not going to be in the starting 11. But Ida comes in and scores a couple of goals. So it almost answers your question, doesn't it? The impact of Ida. And I guess on the right-hand side, it's a question of Kuhn or Forrest. Going into the game, but then Kuhn comes in and scores a double as well. So they're answering these questions, aren't they, Quinny?
It's a great spot for us to be taking them on because, like you said in the intro, like 2 games in a row we scored 6. Last game we scored 5. We're really kind of going up the gears again, and it feels like Rodgers has got the squad really well balanced at doing that. Like the Bayern Munich games, I think Rodgers' squad management for it was pretty impeccable, and we've seen that with the performances, how close we came to doing the unthinkable, as it were. And again, like on Rodgers coming into this, like I think he's been, fantastic for us this year. Like he's really made a material influence on matches. The amount of games when I'm doing analysis and breaking it down afterwards, where like the game is a bit tighter, a bit stodgy, but the subs are the ones that change it, or he makes the rare halftime change or whatever. And again, like it feels like the squad is getting primed up for that. Seal the treble, take care of unfinished business with them at Snake Mountain or Mordor or whatever we're going to call it. And like it's not good that Jota is injured for it. It's also we would much rather have him than not, right? But if you do look at the 24-25 season, you want to start Kun, you want to start Maeda, and although Jota has made that possible in a way as well, I think having Ida from the start, this should be one of our best attacking performances, I would think, because Ida has got the bit right between the teeth right now in a few different ways, and he's in form, and he's a guy where he punches and punches normally. We've seen that in his short Celtic career already. It's not like he scores all the time, but he'll score like 5 in 3 games or, something like that. So in terms of like, yeah, it's obviously means we're not going to have Jota. The rest of the team's probably quite predictable anyway, but it feels like, going into this one, Rodgers has got his firing on all cylinders at the right time for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the games I watched it with you because I reckon we could probably look at some of the things we did wrong over the last 3 games against Rangers, albeit one of them we ended up winning the League Cup at the end of it. So it can't be that bad. But when you're looking at particularly the last 2 games against them, Quinny, and the fact that, things weren't right, we get back into the last game and then, we lose a really, really soft goal against them. And people go on about, dead rubbers and all this kind of stuff. I don't buy into that. I think that there's something to be had in terms of the momentum going into this game, particularly because of the form that we're in since the St Johnstone disappointment. But also, you've got to kind of lay your ghosts to rest also, don't you, when you've had 2 really bad performances against them in a row. And it's not even about bragging rights. I couldn't care less if they think that's like winning a trophy, because it's clearly not. But also the momentum of continuing to the end of the season into the Scottish Cup final is ever so important as well. And that's why I think there'll be minimal changes. Obviously, the Jota one will be forced. I think you'll go Kun because he got that spark back as well. And I think, obviously, the rest of the team, for me, picks itself. He's found his strongest backline at the moment. I don't know. I'm not worried about Trusty. I think Trusty next season will play plenty of games. But between now and the end of the season, Scalesy will partner Carter Vickers. What did you make of Taylor? Often front and centre of celebrations and all that kind of stuff. Clearly a very, very popular member of the squad. That's come through many, many times. And there was a wee rumour last week that, they might have been able to meet in the middle. He's maybe going to stay. Rodgers was asked again about him after the game. Where are we with Greg Taylor, do you think?
It feels a lot of the rumours are now saying it's going to get done. It's going to get ratified now. So, I'd love to see. I've never wanted Taylor to leave. I've always been quite a big fan of what he's brought to the team, while still realising he's not the answer to every problem we've got, and there is space for the team to get stronger. And it's not been officially announced, but everyone is publicly recognised at this point. Even Rodgers had mentioned it, that Tierney's obviously coming back and all the rest of it. So it's it's going to be the strongest left back situation we've ever had, which is a weird thing to be happy about, I suppose. But it's also really good because they're totally different players. And I'm a big Taylor fan, and it's mainly for that different kind of job, that different angle he gives us, because domestically it is like an OP move to have a guy like him that can just go forth and overload in different positions and not cause imbalance in the team, and still have like a good kind of tactical balance and everything else. So yeah, it's a great move. And again, like the value of the wages is probably the thing most people kind of differ on this one, but I'm very much of like, known quantities are so valuable, because the amount of players that you just don't know until you bring them in, personal wise, ambition, drive, a lot of these intangibles that you would never really get a sniff of until they're on the training pitch and until they're at the coalface. You know all that already, and I think that saves you a lot of money, even though you will never feel it, because that money just will then never be spent on buying another backup left back or heir to Tierney again. So I don't really care, as long as it's within reason. It's not crazy. The reported is 25k, and I think for the structure that we've had reported, for the most part, it's maybe a wee bit out of line, but considering his service and everything else we're going to get out of him, I don't think it should be that much of a sticking point, personally.
Yeah, I don't know if we ever did envisage Schlupp long term. There was a point where I would have kept him, but from an English Premiership club where he's used to very, very high wages, Quinny, albeit he's out of contract at the end of the season, you ask yourself, how much would he be getting? How much would you be giving him? And you think, well, there's going to be other kind of that type of player will be available at the end of the season. Do we go for an Alex Baye type player coming through an academy with lots of promise and a sell on? So it's not as easy as many think that, just go out and buy somebody else, bring in Tierney and buy somebody else. He is the tried and tested. But I also think that there's a real quality to a player that's been at a football club for 6 or 7 years. And during that period, they have known what it takes to win. They know the demands of the football club. We brought up the image of Tony Ralston chewing on a bottle of bud or whatever it was previously. These guys are, to the squads, I think they're vital. And I think Greg Taylor to the squad would be vital as well. And you would end up spending a lot more money trying to replace them. Diego Quacksalt was mentioned earlier on. You bring in guys like him from AC Milan and he doesn't make it at Celtic, Quinny. It's very, very difficult to find a very specialist player because they are pretty much a specialist. And Brendan Rodgers was talking about the amount of game time that Greg would get, or whoever is going to be playing so-called second fiddle to Kieran Tierney is going to get next season. So, I would hope that a deal can be done. And of course, another thing I really liked at the weekend was Luke McCowan after the game. And he says, I was in there the last time we won it at Tannadice. I was in the crowd. I love that stuff. I absolutely love it. And I know I've said a few times that we need to get to the point where McCowan's just another part of the squad and we don't just go on about him living the dream like he's a competition winner. And it's all about, trying to get in and get more game time. But I did love that after the final whistle when he was talking about being in the crowd. That would have been the one each game in 2022, I think, where Giakoumakis scored.
Yeah. And I think, I've always been really happy over the last couple of years when Celtic have extended Ralston's contract, Forrest's contract, and we're also missing some of that next generation coming through. But when we talk about the squad having an identity, personality, knowing the club and all the rest of it, it's guys like this that kind of maintain that throughout the years. Because if you remove Taylor, Ralston and Forrest from that squad, you keep McGregor because he's been ever present in the first team. I know Forrest has been in and around it, but obviously for a winger, everyone kind of recognises age-wise he's past peak or whatever. So if you remove those guys out the team over the last 3 years and put in Telio, Laxalt and random other backup right back, the squad would overall miss a bit of something, maybe a wee bit of camaraderie, a wee bit of competitive edge, and that thing that we're all kind of chatting about of getting the club, so that when other players sign in, they're coming into an environment, and we hear all the time with ex-players when they're doing podcasts and stuff. Now, every team, from everyone's experience I've ever, it has a personality, and that's driven by the individuals in it. And that's definitely something that Celtic, as a club, as a company, as an institution or whatever, have as a duty of care, for lack of a better term, to make sure that the environment there is distinctly our own and is there to promote the qualities of the club, the history of the club and everything else. Fabric of the squad, I like to think of those guys as, and Luke McCowan fits into that as well.
I love that, Quinny. Interesting enough, I was just going to say that one of the reasons I watch so much of that type of content in relation to ex-players, if you like, and very, very few of them actually played with Celtic, but I do find them interesting, is because they give you an insight into, as you say, that camaraderie, the team spirit. It's not a case of buying 11 players, put them in a dressing room, it's going to work. It's about the blend of players, and so, you get all the funny stories and all that as well. But I love to hear about changing rooms from a winning team and what it was that they did and who were the leaders. And sometimes they would do things that were a wee bit unorthodox to garner that team spirit. There was one recently, and we obviously interviewed Simon Donnelly in an early episode of This Is Acsom, and we had spoken to Jackie the week or two before about that moment where Tosh McKinlay headbutts Henrik Larsson. And then Tosh got an opportunity to respond to that because Tosh was on a few weeks later. He hadn't really spoken about it since it happened. I think, one of these things, it's like when people talk about Hartson kicking Berkovic, even though Berkovic, now I've got no time for him whatsoever. He's a horrible, horrible wee guy. But John Hartson was actually affected by doing that because there was an effect on his family, press turning up at his door and all that stuff, Quinny. So it leaves a bad taste in his mouth to think back on it. And I think Tosh was the same with Henrik. There was a flashpoint at training. But what I found really interesting about that flashpoint is that there was a lot of things leading up to it. There was a lot of tension between all the new guys that had come in. There was also kind of division between the Scottish core and the overseas players. And there was cliques developing and all this stuff. And then all of a sudden, Tosh and Henrik have that coming together at Barrowfield, and it cleared the air. It actually cleared the air. And from there, that was almost a turning point, Quinny. So sometimes I like to hear even of the unorthodox. I mean, I wouldn't suggest that you stick the head in their star player to clear the air and the tension, but it worked. We went on and we won the league under Wim Jansen. But you mentioned the man, and I'm going to bring him up. Here he is outside the stadium, in front of the Jocks team statue, of course. And Brendan Rodgers has given it the "We are not worthy" for anybody who loved Waynesboro back in the day. And look at Jamesy Forrest. I mean, he's never one to, hog the limelight or any of that kind of stuff, Quinny. I don't think he's on social media. He maybe is. I've never seen him on the socials. He goes about his business. A role model without, I think, shouting and screaming about it, just does his thing. Anybody coming to the football club is going to look up to a guy like Jamesy. He's in his 16th season and he's now the most decorated footballer in the history of Celtic. And what I loved about his wee interview after the game was he said, that he has the utmost respect for Bobby Lennox, who's got 25 trophies to his name. And he's spoken to him a few times, and he'll go and see him in the coming days. I mean, that's just a touch of class, isn't it?
Yeah, big time. And again, Forrest is very much in that realm now of being, you can already see him when he's retired, still being here somehow, doing something, not in a bad way, but he's very much a club guy in that respect, and I'm sure he's had multiple contacts with all these legends down the years and all that, and him going to see him is probably something he's very comfortable to do, and is a good kind of respect thing as well. I don't think it's something anyone would have expected him to do or say or think ahead to. So yeah, it's another mark of him, I suppose, as well. And the good thing about him, I think, as well, is he is a Celtic player. He's a winger, takes people on. He's a guy who likes to get to the box. He likes to score a goal or two himself. And it's not just and I know Bain's a bit of a joke figure for it now, but he's not he's done all this stuff and won all these medals, and he's just been an afterthought or a bit part player or kind of just on the edge of the team. He's been one of our best players for so many of those 16 years, all the way through, from breaking into the team to trebles and European nights and everything as well. And he's on that kind of swan song now at the end of his career, where it's about putting the finishing touches on the legacy, and accolades like this hopefully becomes a little bit less shy over the next couple of years and we hear a wee bit more from him. But yeah, I thought that was a great picture, buzzing for him as well, that he's won that accolade.
I can't see him being one of the guys sitting there giggling with Charlie Mulgrew talking about what happened behind the scenes. I just can't see it. I just cannot see it. And there's a few good comments coming through. Very, very, for me, it's one of the days where you look at what we've achieved and how far we've come, and you've just got to kind of soak it all up. And it's great that people are coming in on the comment section on this Monday afternoon. There's another one about the duck. Here's another Polish style name. It's Jackie Kłakanowski. And that comes from Alpha0964. Unbelievable. Also, apparently, says Fake Zone on Twitch, just to prove that we do read out the Twitch comments as well. Fergus the Fox. Is that what we named him back in the day? I can't remember calling him Fergus. But Fergus came in and saved the day. Now, here's a wee bit of credit and feedback to Quinny from Henrik McLarson. Quinny is a master of the pod. He frequently talks for an hour or more on his Todd. Those are tough ones, but they're quite enjoyable though, Quinny, because you just talk to the commenters for an entire hour. I enjoy it.
Yeah, it's good fun. Kind of once you wind me up, I need to remind myself what I started talking about to bring it back to a point. But thanks very much. I do appreciate that. And I must say, the chat has had me in stitches, and the chat would be very well served to put a lot of these duck comments in the comment section at the end of the show as well, so that everyone can see them. But I seen this is Quacksom as well. I thought that was a cracker.
If we get the
Virgil
duck
van
on,
yeah.
honestly, if we get the duck on and his owner, of course, or her owner, then we might have to change the name of it for that one episode. Paul brings up a really interesting point. Paul Bosas, welcome to the show. You're tuning in on the YouTube. Thanks everybody for doing that. If you are watching on YouTube and you don't yet subscribe, then give us a subscribe, give us a thumbs up. We used to have, it was 64%. Quinny, back in the day, of our viewers didn't subscribe to the channel. That's pretty bizarre. But we have turned that round, and it's now 46% of you don't subscribe. So it costs nothing, and you can switch on the notifications. And whenever This Is Quacksom is ready to come on, there'll be a wee reminder for you. So come on, we're going for 50,000. I was going to say 55 now. We're going for 50,000 subscribers. So hit the subscribe button. Our captain, says Paul, needs to stand up in this next game at Ibrox. Callum has come off second best in the previous two games against them. In my opinion, if Callum is firing on all cylinders, then we will win. Brendan Rodgers mentioned Callum's absence in a game against Rangers, and he said, and we put Arnie Engels in that position, and the big man. It was one of the Brendan Rodgers things that if you weren't kind of sure of yourself, you would start doubting yourself as a footballer. Thankfully, Arnie seems quite confident in his ability. But we do miss him. And I think there will be that kind of personal thing as well. We're talking about Jamesy Forrest and Callum McGregor, Quinny. And they've got over 1,000 games between them in a Celtic jersey. Unbelievable, right? See that continuity? It's irreplaceable. You cannot buy it. You just cannot buy it. That's why we constantly going about constantly rebuilding the youth coming through, because we need the next Callum McGregor and the next Jamesy Forrest to pick up that baton eventually. And that's going to happen in the next 3 or 4 years when both of those players are no longer part of the side. And you think to yourself, right, so what's next? Or there's a few guys that have been here for 2 or 3 years who knew nothing of the club before we signed them. You need to retain the identity, don't you? You need to bring it through the next batch of talent, and that's why I'm so concerned that we're not doing it enough.
Yeah, that's definitely. Well, I've kind of mentioned with the Forest thing a minute ago. It's like the fabric of the team, isn't it? And like Forrest has had the luxury of being here for 16 years. He's went through so many generations. You think about the generation that he kind of just about broke in with. It's kind of the last kind of harkings of the early Millennium squad, I suppose, really, wasn't it? And then with McGregor not too far behind himself, managed by the likes of Neil Lennon and all this kind of thing, that, yeah, it does maybe become a wee bit of a squad character worry. You fast forward 5 years from now, where's that character going to come from? Is someone like Alistair Johnson still going to be in the squad by then? Is Greg Taylor, Tierney, are these guys still going to be around? McKibben? And then is there anyone coming up in and behind them to play with, like Taylor's, McGregor's and Forrest and that sort of thing? For sure. I think this is a big game for McGregor as well, but I do think like the main thing that in the first derby game we didn't do as well in, I think it was in December or whatever, they kind of changed up their plan a little bit, and there was a wee bit of writing on the wall that they were going to do that. It wasn't a huge change. I forget the details around it because I didn't look at it in advance for this. And then we played them again, and we'd acted as if the first game hadn't happened. They did the same thing again, the same game plan. And I know McGregor wasn't available, like he says, it was Engels, but it felt like we just didn't learn from the first time. And yeah, we're Celtic and we play our way and we'll decide how the game goes by how we want to attack the game and all the rest of that. I get it. But one of the big things Rodgers has got praise for this year is adapting to Atalanta away, Bayern Munich over 2 games and this sort of thing. And to, like not take them lightly, because I don't think they should be like super, like, not you disrespect your opponent or anything like that, but I don't think it's like, oh, we have to change what we're doing because it's Rangers. I don't think you go all the way there, but there has to be a level of recognition in the strategy for the match of adapting that midfield shape that they changed, because what everyone's tried to do for the last 3 years is work out how to suffocate McGregor, and we've had a few different teams try some different things that have worked for a match or two, then we get wise to it and it doesn't work anymore. But that last little attempt that we've seen Rangers do it, and it was a right copy of somebody else that did well against us. Was it Hibs, maybe? I forget. I think it might have been Hibs.
You're right. It was Hibs. Yeah.
Yeah. Then to go into this game not aware of that would be the number one frustration for me. And a big part of that is what Rodgers even said himself post-match at the weekend. McGregor's best strength in that game is like knitting the play and building it up and building the web and all that stuff, of course. But it's also like breaking the lines. When McGregor gets off his marker or he gets played into space to run with the ball, he's devastating. You know, he cuts teams open. He doesn't really miss. Fair enough at Bayern Munich, he had a bit of a miss, and there's been one or two times where I think it was a pass for Dyson. Maybe it may have even been at the weekend, but it was he played the channel rather than playing the wing. And I'm not saying he's perfect or anything, but so often if McGregor's on the front foot driving through the middle of the pitch, something's going to happen, you know, and that's his number one quality. So I would like to see him grab the game by the scruff of the neck in that way, like the commenter was saying. But I also don't really hold him completely like individually accountable for the last couple of games. I think it was kind of the strategy of the match, the tactics of the team, sadly.
I agree with that. Jackie McNamara picked it up as well in relation to trying to nullify Callum McGregor and how Dundee United tried to do it at the weekend. And Brendan then waxed lyrical about Callum in the way that he just turns up every week. But the one player I want to see having a big game actually against Rangers at Ibrox is Annie Engels, because it's almost as if they've got like I don't know if it's a mailing list or a memo and follow where they give you answers to any criticism that a Celtic fan might have. And all I've been getting all weekend is that Raskin's a better Belgian midfielder than Arnie Engels and all this nonsense. So I would love him. I'd love the big fella just to boss it at Ibrox. I thought he was excellent at Tannadice. I thought he was brilliant. I mean, that pivot for the ball that he played through was just sensational. One big shout out, I don't want to forget this, our very own double denim, Chris McElwain, did the kilt walk over the weekend. Absolutely tremendous. And here's some of the stats here for all the statos out there. 8 hours and 18 minutes. Hopefully you can shave a few minutes off of that next year, mate. 23.7 miles, 53,000 steps. And the most important bit, raising 1,250 quid for wee Jamie Tierney. So well done to Chris and all his friends that he did it with. I think there was 4 of them who did it. And that was brilliant. That was brilliant to see. That's why Chris was, finishing the post-match stuff and going right to meet his mates and then get prepared to go and do the kilt walk. It's brilliant to see these people who are just willing to give time and effort and money, Quinny, to raise cash for underprivileged people who really need it. That's all it comes down to. You know, these people need our help, and we, Jamie, and his family will be delighted with that. So well done, Chris. Absolutely. A gem of a guy. This is Acsom. I cannot wait for this week's episode. Now, the whole idea of this, Quinny, actually, I could do that every single week the way we did it with that panel. I thought it was brilliant, right? But obviously availability and all that kind of stuff, it's not always possible. But I also want to be able to interview other people with a Celtic state of mind, be that from the world of the arts, film, music, politics, comedy, whatever it might be. Ex-players, I love tapping into ex-players' mindsets, Quinny, and getting some, not just funny anecdotes, but actually finding out what it was that generated an energy within a Celtic side that made us winners and all this kind of stuff. Players that went through hard times and how we came through that. I love hearing all that kind of stuff. And this week, I'm not joking, many, many times on Acsom, I have mentioned the fact that Celtic's genesis, the formation of this great football club, is a Hollywood movie. I've said it so many times, it's a Hollywood movie. And I remember reading, probably over a decade ago, that Peter Mullen had written a story about Celtic and he wanted Daniel Day-Lewis to play Brother Wilfred and all this stuff. Well, I read about this years ago. It's out there. And the name of the film was Paradise, right? And it was one of the things you just thought, I hope and pray that someday we see that movie. So tune in on Friday night because we might have an update on it. There you go. Because tomorrow we will be recording this week's This is Acsom, and on Friday night a wee bit more will be known about any kind of developments in relation to Paradise, the movie. Now, we are trying to get up to 50,000. All you need to do is click subscribe. It's free of charge, and you will get free daily content and hopefully become part of the Acsom community. Even with a live event, we're going to have a free one for the Rangers game at Bad. We're also sold out at Gracie's with Lubo Moravchik, and I just got word this morning that our gig over in Belfast with the one and only Paddy Lavery is completely sold out. Well done, Paddy. That's unbelievable because you've had the tickets, I think, for less than a week. So well done to Paddy. Cannot wait to come over to Belfast. But if you want to join us at another one, Stubbsy and Tosh, the aforereferenced Tosh McKinley, will be joining us at the end of May. And if you want to get tickets, the link is underneath this video. I've got to agree with the commenter. I love Quinny on Acsom. Absolutely delighted that you were able to join me today. Thanks for joining me, Quinny. And
Pleasure.
thanks everybody else for joining us on A Celtic State of Mind.